Why China is terrified of U.S. Air Force. The United States Air Force, or USAF, is the world's largest and most powerful air force. It has a far larger and more modern aircraft force than the Chinese Air Force, or PLAAF. The USAF has a global presence, whereas the PLAAF is solely concerned with protecting China's airspace. Because of these circumstances, China believes that the U.S. Air Force will have a significant edge in any battle between the two nations. As a result, in order to reduce the gap with the USAF, China has been spending extensively on its own Air Force. However, it will be several years before China's Air Force can compete with the U.S. Air Force in terms of strength, technology, and reach. The Chinese are well aware of the U.S. Air Force's advantages, and they are understandably terrified. The USAF is a major threat to China's security, and it is likely to remain so for many years to come. Now, we'll delve deep into it. The first reason China is terrified of the U.S. Air Force is that they are now outgunned and outnumbered. While this may come as a surprise given that China has around 4 times the population and an economy equivalent to the United States, this is due to both strategic mistakes taken by China that have harmed their total aviation capabilities and allowed the U.S. to attain numerical and technological dominance. China has achieved exponential breakthroughs in military technology across all spectrums of conflict during the last 20 years or more. However, the Chinese military, like its American counterparts, has funding restrictions. With a military budget that is generally 1/3 that of the United States, they must cut savings in a variety of areas. Unfortunately for the Chinese, they have a history of cutting costs with their Air Force, resulting in this large difference in both the quantity of combat aircraft and their capabilities. In terms of raw numbers, the U.S. Air Force alone possesses more aircraft than China's Air Force, Army, and Naval Air Force combined. The U.S. Air Force alone has somewhat more than 5,200 aircraft, with over 2,400 more on order for delivery in the future. That starkly contrasts with the roughly 3,300 aircraft the entire Chinese military can bring to the fight today. However, the United States has not only a significant numerical advantage, but also considerably better technology. 5th-generation aircraft, for example, is the gold standard of fighter technology for current air combat. 5th-gen fighter aircraft have advanced stealth technology and can defeat most, if not all, anti-aircraft radars, supercruise capabilities, secure and unbreakable communication suites, highly integrated computer and weapon systems, and strong airframes that are both flexible and light. The U.S. Air Force has 2 of these aircraft. The first of these is the F-22, which entered service in the early 2000s. Despite being very costly, many believe this capable and lethal aircraft to be the king of any modern dogfight. The F-35, a similar design, ultimately achieved full operational capability a few years ago, and the Air Force now has over 300 of these aircraft. With just under 200 F-22s in service, the U.S. Air Force is by far the world's largest 5th-generation fighter force, which is rising year after year. The Chinese Air Force similar fighter, the J-20, lags well below U.S. capabilities. While U.S. military officials have been pleasantly impressed by its maneuverability and the armament packages that the Chinese have installed on it, it is only slightly equivalent to the F-22 and does not come close to matching the capacity of the F-35. However, 5th-generation fighters are not the only aircraft that might engage in peer-to-peer conflict. While they are nonetheless excellent aircraft, they frequently lack the stealth technology and modern avionics seen in 5th-generation fighters such as the F-22 and F-35. Despite having somewhat less capacity than their 5th-generation younger siblings, 4th-generation fighters such as the F-15 and F-16 outperform their Chinese J-10, J-11, and J-16 equivalents. One of the key causes of this is the unavailability of jet engines. China has struggled to build and manufacture its aircraft engines at home. For decades, they have either purchased, attempted to reverse engineer, or outright stolen sophisticated engine designs. This is a major issue for China because of funding limits that prevent research and development, and because their culture discourages critical thinking. Despite its strong industrial base, China lacks an open economy that encourages profit-driven development as the U.S. does. As a result, China cannot develop the majority of its products for both civilian and military markets. Consider the straightforward ballpoint pen. You probably use one every day and don't think twice about it. While Americans in the United States may take this writing implement for granted, China faced significant challenges in producing it. For many years, China produced 80% of the world's ballpoint pens, but had to have all the ballpoints manufactured elsewhere and brought to China to be assembled. After tremendous popular demand and official interference, China was finally allowed to create its local ballpoint pen in 2017. So since China can't even make a pen, they surely can't make an aviation engine capable of making their jets more powerful than their U.S. counterparts. This is abundantly demonstrated by China's woeful progress in designing, manufacturing, and fielding its jet engines. China has been unsuccessfully seeking to reverse engineer American aircraft engines since the late 1970s. Instead, they have mainly relied on nations like Russia to supply them with jet engines. This is best evidenced when the Chinese agreed with Russia to purchase several hundred Su-27 flanker aircraft because they had the best engines China could get their hands on at the time. After producing about 100 aircraft, the Chinese started making unlicensed copies that became the J-11. Because of this, Russia has been reluctant to sell China any more engines or aircraft, and as a result, progress has remained slow for the past 20 years in building comparable jet engines for its fighters like the U.S. possesses. It was not until the last few years that China made progress with its first domestically produced engine, the WS-10. Despite being a great leap forward in jet engine technology, the WS-10 falls well below what U.S. engines are capable of, especially because of its lack of supercruising abilities. In aerial combat, having the ability to supercruise is a game changer. This means that the aircraft can travel faster than the speed of sound. Historically, this has been accomplished through the use of afterburners, but these have their downsides. The biggest disadvantage is that the pilot can only fly at speeds greater than Mach 1 for a limited duration. With modern engine technology, such as that found in the F-22, fifth-generation fighters in the United States may operate at sustained supersonic speeds without the need for afterburners. Even China's most modern fighter, the J-20, is incapable of doing so. Furthermore, despite the fact that China has produced hundreds of these engines, their performance has been uneven at best. While they are undoubtedly good when they function, they are frequently broken. This is due to the WS-10 requiring maintenance up to 10 times more frequently than comparable systems in the United States. This means that Chinese fighters powered by this engine are out of battle more frequently than their American counterparts. But a lack of progress in creating reliable jet engines has not only hurt future developments, but has also caused their fourth-generation fighters to be at a disadvantage to their fourth-generation U.S. counterparts. As a general rule, the J-10 and J-11, depending on the variant, are heavier and slightly larger than the F-15 and F-16. While differing doctrinal opinions, such as the Chinese Air Force being used mainly as a ground support force rather than the air dominance arm, have played a factor, the main differences have come from having to compensate for their inferior engines. Chinese and Russian engines are less fuel efficient than those produced in the United States. As a result, if Chinese aircraft wish to improve their combat range or fly at faster speeds, they must carry more fuel. Because China has fallen behind in metallurgical technology for making lighter, stronger airframes, the aircraft must be larger to carry all of this excess weight. The larger the aircraft and the more fuel it carries, the fewer weapons it can carry, further undermining Chinese air power. As a result, despite great advances in Chinese avionics and weapon technology, both their fourth and fifth generation fighters remain outclassed by the U.S. Air Force, which can travel further, move faster, and hit harder than what the Chinese could ever hope to do right now. China has been rapidly growing its Air Force to try and beat the U.S. through raw numbers to compensate for inferior technology. As for the making of this video, China has about 1,300 fourth-generation and 200 fifth-generation fighters, a lot less than what the U.S. fields. But while China's fourth-generation efforts are rapidly catching up with the U.S. as the U.S. Air Force fields more F-35s, this gap in technological capability will only widen unless China rapidly produces many more fighters and better engines. Another critical factor that would enable Chinese fighters to gain air superiority is their armament. Chinese engineers have developed several extremely powerful weapons during the last decade. The PL-15 has been the most common and destructive of these for U.S. fighters. The PL-15, which entered service over 10 years ago, represented a significant advancement in Chinese air-to-air missile technology. Not only is it very fast, with theoretical speeds of up to Mach 4 and secure two-way data links between the firing units, but it also has a remarkable range, with Chinese sources suggesting a range of up to 300 kilometers. While this range may appear to be a little out of reach,